Okay, good afternoon, scholars. Welcome to our talk today, which is by Dr. Janet Bolaji and Dr. Sarah Filson. We're going to be looking at how to get into university to study medicine, which I know is what a lot of you would like to be doing when you're growing up. And also at the end, we're going to talk a little bit about our university residential for our Year 9 and 10 students tuning as well. Okay, so over to Dr. Bolaji and Dr. Filson.
Hi, good afternoon, guys.
Good afternoon.
How is everybody today?
Great.
Good. So, thank you for the introduction. My name's Sarah. I'm a doctor currently working at St George's. This is Janet. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about studying medicine and obviously working as a doctor, which is what we both do. We thought we'd start a little bit with just a bit of an introduction about ourselves, and then kind of how we got into medicine, what we currently do, and how we feel about it in general. So I'll let Janet start off first.
Sure. Hello everyone. Sarah said it's great to be here. Thank you for having us. So I'll just tell you a little bit about my story. So I finished medical school about 3 years ago. And I am now doing a master's. So when you finish medical school, you do 2 years of what's called a foundation program. So you kind of learn how to be a doctor and learn the clinical skills of what to do. So I finished doing that, and I'm now doing a master's, so learning a little bit more about public health and nutrition. So I'm back at university this year. But next year, I'll be starting my training in general practice. So kind of like your local GP or your family doctor. That's what I'm going to be doing from August onwards. So I'll spend 3 years doing that, just learning how to be a GP. So that's just a little bit about my story. As I talk a bit later on, I'll tell you a little bit more about me. So.
Okay, and so just to kind of let you know exactly what I do, so I currently work as an infectious diseases registrar. Does anybody know what infectious diseases are? Yeah?
All the diseases are easily spread by different methods like sneezing, coughing, coughs, physical contact.
Very good. That's that's very good. Those are all the types of things I try to tell my patients not to do to each other. But yes, so I deal with a range of different illnesses, mainly spread by bacteria, viruses, parasites, and fungi. I deal with patients who have infections from travelling, patients who come into hospital just from the community, as well as patients who've got infections in hospitals as well. So I've been doing that now for the last year and a bit, and prior to that I was a junior doctor. I still officially am a junior doctor, but I was a junior doctor in a few other London hospitals, and I originally graduated about 6 years ago, so I went to Bart's Hospital. Have any of you heard of Bart's? It's one of the oldest medical schools and hospitals in the country in East London, and that's where I studied to be a doctor. Did that for 5 years before I started working. So I love my job on a day-to-day basis. It's really interesting. Loads of varying different things to do. My day is varied from day-to-day basis. So yeah, that's a bit about my job.
What subjects did you study for GCSE?
So we'll come back a little bit to the types of subjects that you need to study for GCSEs and then for A-levels. But I think the thing to say is for me, I did just your average GCSEs, maths, English. I did double science, I didn't do single science, although a lot of medical schools now require you to do single sciences. And then I did Latin, Russian, what else did I do? History. And yeah, I can't remember the other one. Sorry, it's quite a few years ago now. Go ahead.
What single science?
So it depends on what your school does, but I think some schools will do double science, which means you still do, which I'm assuming is what you guys do. So you still do chemistry, physics, and biology, but you only get 2 grades for it. So all of 3 of your subjects go together to give you 2 grades. I don't know how that works, but in other places, you will do each subject separately and get a separate grade for each subject.
I think that was combined science.
Yeah, so that's what it is. Okay, cool.
An important thing we didn't mention at the beginning, actually. Does anyone know what BMA stands for?
Bachelor's.
Very good guess.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Arts Medical Academy.
So it stands for the British Medical Association. So and the British Medical Association is a trade union and professional body that kind of looks after medical students and doctors. So both of us are representatives for other junior doctors, and that's kind of how we come here today.
Okay, so that's a little bit about us. I've got a couple of slides. Feel free to interrupt as I go along, but essentially, as Janet said, we're representatives for junior doctors as part of the BMA, and the BMA now have a program in which they're trying to inspire and aspire young people to go into medicine. So that's why we're here, and I hope that maybe some of you in the future will think about studying medicine. So this diagram here essentially is an overview of the career of a doctor. It goes through the different stages which doctors follow in order to become either consultants, general practitioners, or specialists in a specific area. What I'm going to do on the next slide is just go through each bit in a bit more detail. So let's start with studying for medicine. So medical school, depending on where you go, can be anything from 3 to 4 years to 7 years. There are a number of different pathways into medicine, and the majority of people will take the first pathway, which is this undergraduate medical course. And what that means is you go straight from sixth form or secondary school, i.e. college years or whatever, into medicine. And with that, you do 5 years, normally 2 years of preclinical studies, and then 3 years of clinical studies. Courses vary across the country, and so some courses will be a lot more hands-on than others. The important thing when thinking about where you want to go for medical school is think about the type of learner you are. And what that means is, are you somebody who's a bit more practical, likes to do things that are a bit more hands-on, or do you like to sit in a lecture hall and listen to people lecture? Do you like to know about the minutiae of everything? And once you think about the type of person you are, it's always worthwhile doing your research to work out which medical school will fit to your style of learning.
Sorry, can I interrupt? What do you mean by hands-on versus sort of in the lecture theatre?
So a prime example, for example, so I went to Berks Medical School. It's got a problem-based learning course, and what that means is that a lot of the study is self-directed. It's centred around patients and around the management of patients from an early on. There are other courses, say for example the Cambridge course, where a lot of the first couple of years is just sitting in lectures, listening to people talk about anatomy, physiology, pharmacology, immunology, all of the basis and basic science that goes into being a doctor.
We also have things like my university. I went to Swansea, and we had case-based learning, so we'd have a different case every week, and from that we would then pick the anatomy, how you treat them, so you give them any drugs. You look at any other members of your multidisciplinary team, so what nurses you might need to speak to, or if you have to speak to physiotherapists. That's kind of how we do. So you have questions?
You know, for that undergraduate, you know, it can be 6 form, do you do that straight after, or you have to go to university?
Okay, so just to repeat what the question was. The question was whether or not with undergraduate you go directly from sixth form or if you do university. So undergraduate is directly from sixth form, so it's a university course that is your first ever experience of university. The reason we make the distinction here is that a little bit like the American system, there are people who have done a degree initially and gone into graduate training. And with graduate, you didn't have to do less years of your initial medical degree. So instead of, say, doing 5 or 6 years, you might only do 4 years because you already have a degree. But there is entry for into medicine directly from sixth form. So yeah, I just briefly went through what graduate entry is. It's not probably something that relevant to you guys right now, but it is an option. I think a lot of people perhaps decide they want to do medicine a bit later on in life, and have already gone and done a degree. Some people would have done a degree in a science subject, other people would have done a degree that's not in a science subject. But even following your initial degree, you can still go on to study medicine, and that's what those 4-year courses are about. Yeah.
When you say you've already done a degree, and that can be in like any subject, do you then do another degree in science or medicine?
So you do another degree in medicine specifically. So not all of the graduate entry courses will take people who haven't done science courses, but there are a few across the country that will take people who haven't done science subjects and allow them to go into the 4-year course. The reason that some of them have this criteria that you have to have done a science degree is because what happens in the 4-year degree, which is separate to the 5-year degree, or different to the 5-year degree, is that essentially your first 2 years are condensed into one. So it's pretty intense. And so you're essentially doing what people have done in 1 year, in 2 years, in 1 year. So that's why some of them have the criteria that you have to have done a science before, because that assumes that you then have kind of an understanding of some of the basic things that you might come across.
So in terms of the workloads, does that mean that an undergraduate medical course would be easier?
No, not necessarily. What it does mean though is just that it's paced in a way that's suitable for people who've just come from sixth form or school, essentially. So I think the thing to say that probably isn't something that you guys will be aware of now is when you do go to university as a whole, a lot of what you do is self-directed, and you have to have a lot of discipline to work and to study. And that can take a bit of getting used to. A lot of people in their first year of university have to adjust to different styles of teaching and a different way in which you learn in university, which is very different to what you might do in even sixth form or high school.
Just to add to that, whilst you're at school, you have lessons, timetables for you have teachers who it's easy to access and to interact with. Because when you go to university, a lot of the time you have a syllabus, and you kind of have quite a lot of your own freedom and autonomy to learn it. So sometimes it can take a while to develop your own learning style and know how it's best for you to learn. So sometimes it can take a little bit of time. So it's quite useful for graduate students to have had that experience already, and then that 4-year intense period is easier to do than if you're coming straight out of high school, if that makes any sense.
Okay. The last block here is about an alternative route to medicine. It's not used very often. I don't know anybody who's personally done this, but there are some universities where if you've done a science degree, they'll let you then go on to do an even shorter medical degree. But I haven't really come across that.
I think a lot of times they're integrated into the medical school. So for instance, St. George's, if you do quite well in their biomedical sciences degree, you can join in the 2nd and 3rd year, so you can switch on to the medical degree. So you just do 1 year extra, so you do 7 years instead of 6. So I think in the UK anyway, it's quite common that if you do that, it will be within the same medical school. So I know St. George's does it, and I think a few others do that as well. So that you switch on to another course.
I was going to say another course that we haven't mentioned here is there's a course at King's where they actually do an extra pre-medical year. So again, that's for people, I think it's specifically for people who live in Southwark or around King's University, but they give them an extra year of, again, extra help with their sciences, bringing them up to a standard that would be appropriate for them then to go into the 5-year degree.
So that's the EMDP course. I think it's only open to students from particular schools in London, but I'm not sure whether this school is eligible or not, but if it is, then they have a lot of help to allow students to get into the course, and for that first year as well, they give you lots of mentorship and just to make sure that you succeed in this.
In regards to speaking about other kind of access courses, etc., Imperial do a course which kind of starts, I think, from about the age of 14 or 15, where you can do a summer course with them. And so they have a kind of what they call an outreach course where people apply into this course and they get a couple of summers of extra kind of medical exposure prior to applying to medical school. So I believe that you guys would be within the right area for that because it's Imperial. And so I'll try and find the information later on to see if I can give it to you guys.
They'll do similar with the King's.
Yeah. So that's, you've got into med school, you've gone through med school, you come out the other end, you're a doctor now. What do you do then? So I would say one of the good things about studying a medical degree is that in some ways you're guaranteed a job at the end. And what that means is that the majority, if not everybody, who finishes a medical degree in universities within the country then go on to do what we call our foundation training. And what that is it's a 2-year job in which you learn to really be a doctor. So medical school does prepare you to be a doctor, but foundation training really cements it. It can be quite a tough process. What tends to happen is at the end of your medical degree, you do what we call a situational judgment test, which is a countrywide test. It looks at your aptitude in various different areas, and it helps to allocate people in terms of rankings, which then gives you the opportunity to go to various different areas around the country. So everybody will go into foundation training, and actually, although officially at the end of your medical degree you are a doctor, you're only provisionally registered with the GMC, and that is our registering body. So every kind of professional area has a registering body. So nurses have the NMC, we have the GMC, which stands for the General Medical Council, and they are the people who regulate all doctors within the country. Yes?
When you finish medical school, does that mean like you can go to another country and be a doctor?
So yes, it does to an extent. The majority of people will still then have to finish at least their first year of foundation training before they can then independently, if they want, apply to work in other places.
Is medical school the same thing as going to university?
Yes. That's a very good question, actually. Is medical school the same thing as going to university? It is. What you will find is that not all universities have medical schools, but all medical schools are part of universities. However, if you speak to a medical student, they will say, I go to X medical school. And sometimes this can be quite a bone of contention because there will be rivalries between the university and the medical school, which is a good thing and a bad thing. It's mainly because of the fact that the majority of people who go to university for 3 years. The medical students and the dentistry students and the veterinary students, etc., spend a much longer period of time at university, and because of that, they become quite insular and get used to spending time with their peers who are medics or dentists or vets or however. And they spend also, as well as spending time on the university campus, you'll also spend time in different hospitals. And so that's why often medical schools are seen as separate to the university they're a part of, but they are all a part of the university somewhere. Does that make sense? Right. So once people have done foundation training, as Janet and myself have both done, they then have a choice to go into specialty training. And that is where you decide what kind of doctor you want to be. So medicine is a very broad church. There are about 60 specialties. There are so many different things you can do with it. You can be a specialist in sports medicine. You can be a specialist in skin, in bones and joints. There are so many options. And some people are very interested in dealing with just one particular system, whereas other people like a bit more of a broader outlook on things. So for example, my specialty, infectious diseases, I'm not interested in just one system. People can have infections wherever they want in the body, and I'll sort of cast them. Whereas if you are an orthopedic doctor or a rheumatologist, i.e. a bone doctor or a joints doctor, that's all you're really interested in. Yes?
Can you pick between if you just want one thing or like another thing that is everything?
Yes, exactly. So this is the point at which you pick. So following your foundation training, often the first choice people will make is whether or not they're a medical doctor, a surgical doctor, a general practitioner, or a psychiatrist. Those are the main. I mean, there are a couple of other things like obs and gynae, which deals with maternity and women's problems. But at some point, people have a divide, and it's often personality dependent. So when I was a junior, I would look at people and be like, oh, I want to be like that consultant, or I like the way that person's life is, or I like the things they do, the procedures they do, the patients they see. And that's kind of how people will pick their speciality. But in reality, your speciality picks you.
Can studying at medical school mean you can do other jobs not related to medicine?
Yes, it can. Yes. So the majority of people who study medicine will go on to practice as doctors. But the good thing about a medical degree as a whole is that it gives you a number of different skills which you could use in a number of different jobs. So there are a lot of people who go into consulting, like working in the city. There are people who go into working in pharmaceuticals. There are people who go into working in public health, which is still an area of medicine, but a very separate area of medicine because it's not clinical medicine. So there are multiple opportunities that are afforded to you if you complete a medical degree. Yeah.
Can you get those same jobs without being in medical school?
Of course, yes.
So they would be available to you in the separate part of the university?
So if you decided, for example, you wanted to if you're interested in science but don't think you want to be a doctor, science degrees as a whole are regarded very highly amongst most areas of business, finance, journalism, teaching. There are multiple things you can do once you have a degree in any subject, really. I think the thing about university is that it equips you with certain skills that you wouldn't otherwise have if you hadn't gone to university. That doesn't necessarily mean that everybody needs to go to university. There are multiple ways to succeed in life, but university does help with certain skills that might be beneficial in certain jobs. Yes?
So, the more experience you have, does that mean the more money you get?
So one thing I would say about being a doctor is, don't get me wrong, I'm comfortable, and I earn a good salary, but it's not the thing to do if you want to earn loads of money. It affords you a nice, comfortable style of life, but it's not, in terms of money, the most monetary rewarding job. It is a very rewarding job in other ways.
That's 2 questions.
Yeah, sure.
So, how long does it take to get to medical school? And also, what's that starting salaries?
Okay. So, your first question was how long does it take to become a doctor, i.e. to become a consultant or a general practitioner or a specialist? So anywhere from, including medical school, 10 to 15 years, sometimes a bit longer than that. A lot of people, for example, during their specialty training or even their foundation training, might go part-time. And if you go part-time, it extends the amount of time it takes you to train. I think the thing to say is that there isn't ever any rush to become a consultant. As a junior doctor, you still have a lot of experience, you still get to help a lot of people. But obviously the thing about being a consultant or a general practitioner is that you're a bit more autonomous. You're the person in charge, so the buck stops with you once you are a consultant. Yes.
If you did your studying, then foundation training and speciality training, and let's say you wanted to become like a gynecologist, how long on average would that take?
Okay, so from foundation training, you can go directly into specialty training for a number of things. So that includes obs and gynae. So obs and gynae, I think, is another 5 years on top of foundation training. So within about 7 to 8 years. Is it 8 years in total, including? Yeah. S1, S2, okay, right. I stand corrected.
So it gets really complicated after foundation training in terms of thinking about what you want to do. There's some pathways that are called run-through, so it means once you start, you just finish all the way to the end. So that one of them is obs and gynae. So once you apply and get a place, then you just stay in the same trust and you just stay on that job until the end. Whereas other jobs, which they have a break in between. So for instance, if you wanted to be a gastroenterologist, for instance, most of the medical specialties, you have to do what's called core medical training. So now it's 3 years. So you finish your F2, you do 3 years of core medical training. You'd have to apply and interviewed for that job. But then after that 3 years, you'll have to apply and interview for the next, depends on which one you're doing. It might be How long do you do that training?
So another 5 years.
5 years or so after that. So you'd have to then apply again and interview again. And the problem with that is you may not get a job in the same part of the country that you're in, or you might go to a different hospital. So yeah, there are pros and cons. It might be good because you might get to know a different area a bit better, but you may also need to move. So those are the kind of things that people consider when they're applying. So whether their job is going to be run through, so you apply once and you don't have to worry again, or whether you might have to factor in applying a second time.
As you start off kind of as a doctor and then the higher up you get paid more.
Yes, you do.
And so how much money on average do you start out earning?
So I think starting salary for junior doctors now is about 28 to 30,000. It varies depending on so it does vary depending on how much out of hours work you do. So there is a base salary for everybody, and then on top of that, there is an add-on salary depending on the hours you do outside of 9 to 5.
Is that a year or is that like in a year?
A year, yes. Yeah, a year. Yes.
Like being a doctor, does it like take up your time a lot?
So, in terms of whether or not medicine takes up your time a lot, it can do, yes. Finding the right work-life balance can be tricky. However, the more senior you get, the easier that can get. Also, I talked a little bit earlier on about not being a full-time trainee. I think there's a lot of flexibility now in the way in which junior doctors and doctors train, because they realise that actually people want more of a life outside of medicine and also want to have families or do other things alongside of being a doctor. So there'll be a lot of doctors, for example, who perhaps have another thing they do on the side, whether it be a sport or a charity they run or something else they do in order to ensure that they have the right life-work balance. Yes?
Like in medical school and like foundation training, do you have like breaks where you go on holiday?
Yes, you do. Yeah. So, I mean, as with any job, you have a standard annual leave quota per year, which is, depending on what stage of training you are at, can be anything from about 25 to 30, 35 days a year. On top of that, you also will have time which we call study leave. And so because officially, until you're a consultant, you are in training, you have an allocation of time which is dedicated to study. And what that means is you can use it to attend conferences, you can use it to attend training days, you can use it to go and present internationally. So there's a lot that can be done within your day-to-day work and within your life in order to enrich, shall I say, your work-life balance. Okay. Right. So just briefly, I'm going to touch on the application process because it's a bit far off for you guys, I think. There was a really good guidance from the Medical Schools Council. Every year they produce guidance which lists all of the different medical schools, the courses they offer, their entry requirements, and kind of what their courses are like. And it's a really good way to kind of initially decide what school might best suit you. As with other university processes, you apply for it via UCAS. Have you guys all heard of UCAS? Yes? No? Does somebody want to explain what UCAS is? Anybody? Yes, go ahead.
It's a university.
Anybody else? So UCAS is essentially the way in which everybody applies for university. So it's a central system, an online system, in which you can apply to multiple different universities. And the way UCAS works is that it allocates points for subjects and grades. So, for example, if at A level you've done maths, chemistry, biology, you will get a number of points depending on what your grade is, and those points together will be used to decide whether or not you have met the minimum requirement for a course in a specific area or university. Yes.
What does UCAS stand for?
University, college application system, I think. Yeah. So, medicine is slightly different to other degrees and university courses in that you can only apply for a set number of them. So I think in total you have 6 spots you can apply for on the UCAS form. And it can be universities anywhere within the country. So from London to Scotland to Wales to Northern Ireland, I'm assuming as well. With medicine, you're only actually allowed to apply for 4 medical schools. So although you have six spots that you can put universities into, with medicine, they specifically limit it to 4 choices. And with those 4 choices, you will write one joint personal statement and application. And on that, you will also have the references from your schools or college. Yes.
Why are you allowed to apply to 4?
I actually don't know the answer to that question, I'm going to be honest. I think it's because there are a limited number of medical schools in total. So even though there are probably hundreds of universities, there are actually only about 35 medical schools. And because medicine is quite competitive, I believe that's one of the reasons why they limit the number of schools you can apply to.
And also, it says that the deadline is 15th of October. Is that every year?
That's every year. So when you come to apply for university, you apply in your number 6. You apply the year before you go, so that would be your upper 6th. So at the very start of your upper 6th year, that's the second year of your A levels, if that's what they still call them.
Yes. Yeah, you're applying in your final year.
Yeah, you will apply to enter university the following September. So you apply a year in advance, and you apply with your grades from your lower 6th year, as well as your predicted grades for your A levels as a whole. The deadline for medicine is earlier than the deadline for all other subjects. So for medicine, the deadline is in October, whereas I think the rest of the subjects, the deadline is normally in about January.
Unless you're applying for Oxford or Cambridge, and it's the same as medicine, so it's 15th of October.
And what that means is that at that point, you will write a statement which will essentially outline why you want to study medicine and what you've done to date to support your application. Yes?
You know how you said you would apply with your predicted grades for A levels? After you've done your A levels, they also look at those.
They do. So what happens once you have been through the process is you will be given a number of offers. You can only pick one offer and one standby. These offers will be based on what the universities decide they want you to achieve in your A levels as a minimum to get into their university. So often what will happen is you'll get a conditional offer, which will say you need to get 3 A stars and an A or something in order to get into our university. Occasionally, people get what we call unconditional offers, which means that the university want you so much that they will allow you to get whatever you want, essentially. I mean, that normally is on the caveat that they know you're going to get the grades anyway. I mean, I've never known anybody to kind of get an unconditional offer and actually then completely flunk their A levels, but it does happen occasionally. Yes.
So courses like choose Bennifer and Quiz and Trump, stuff like it.
They do, and I think I'm going to hand over to Janet in a bit because we'll go through kind of the types of things you can do to enhance your application.
I'll answer that question in a bit.
Yeah.
Actually, on the very next slide.
Yes.
So, things you can do to, this is particularly when you're coming to apply to medicine, so things to include in your personal statement and all the things you can talk about at interview. So one of the things is work experience, and something that lots of potential medical students will have before they come to medical school. Things to think about in terms of medical experience is not to worry too much. It can be either paid or it can be voluntary. I think the main things about work experience are your reflections on it, so what you gained from the experience. So you don't have to worry about getting prestigious placement somewhere. It's more about what you've learned, what you've gained from that experience. So examples of work experience that people have done is maybe going to your GP surgery and shadowing there for a while, or other people might be able to secure placements at their local hospital or a particular ward, even other things. So I know there are some candidates who maybe have part-time jobs, maybe worked in a pharmacy. I worked in a pharmacy in my sixth form, and I was able to reflect on that at my medical school interview. So it doesn't have to be directly related to medicine, so it doesn't have to be in a hospital, but if you can have some kind of relation to medicine, or be able to reflect on the skills that you've learned from that experience, whether it was a month placement or a 1 year weekly Saturday job, as long as you're able to reflect on how those things make you a more rounded individual and how they'll make you a better medical student and a doctor of the future, then those are useful things to have for work experience. Kind of linking to that, you asked about Duke of Edinburgh. So again, the thing about medical school is they like to see individuals who are quite well-rounded and have things other than good grades, because there'll be lots of people who come to medical school interviews who have top grades. But what makes individuals stand out is the other things, so the things that make you a bit more different, the things that your interests outside of school. So Duke of Edinburgh is a good example. Did you do gold, silver?
We did like bronze next year.
Bronze next year. Awesome. So, oh yeah, of course. So those kind of things, your experiences during your bronze expedition are quite good to have on your personal statement or to talk about at your interview. And just anything else. So whether you take part in any sports or do any other extracurricular activities, they're all really good things to make you stand out and make you look like a well-rounded individual.
Who decides when you get into the university?
So, I'll be coming to that in a bit, but there's various components in terms of medical school applications. So, usually for most medical schools, there is an exam that you might have to take. There's a UK CAT and something called the BMAT. So, for some of those exams, there'll be a cut-off. So, if you get above a certain score, you can come to interview. For some of them, they kind of just take it into consideration. And then usually there's often an interview panel. So there'll be a group of individuals at your interview and they'll mark you according to other applicants that they've had, and you'll get a score according to that. So that's usually how it's made up of.
And what subjects should you study to get into a good medical school?
So in terms of good medical school, I think all medical schools are good. Yeah, so all medical schools are regulated by the GMC, which means that all medical schools are from the GMC's perspective, of equal standing, and they're all good. But I think when it comes to applying to medical school, it's important to try and find where you think you'll excel. So do you want to be in a particular city? Is there a particular type of learning that you would like? I suppose just finding a school or a place where you think you'll enjoy.
So if you're preparing for GCSE and you want to study, should you look at what universities you want to go to?
That was exactly what I was going to come on to. So if you know there's a particular place you really want to go to, you really want to go to this university, that's a good idea to have a look at their website. They'll have their prospectus on there, and you can just look at whether they have any requirements. So they may have requirements for GCSEs, they may have requirements for A-levels. It's a good idea to, if you are thinking about it beforehand, to be aware of that before you start doing your GCSEs and your A-levels, just so you know, and you're not surprised when you come to apply.
I think we've got time for just one more question before we're going to have to wrap up.
Okay.
That's okay. So if anyone has
any last questions?
Any last questions?
No. After our talk, is anyone still interested in applying to medicine? Awesome. Good. good. Doctors of the future.
Excellent. So, can you please join me in a round of applause? Say thank you very much to